According to the organization Real People, Real Stories, at least 30 million people in America deal with eating disorders. And that sounds like a lot, but in reality, it's not, because that statistic only covers people who are seeking professional help. Now, eating disorders don't discriminate. There's no specific person, there's no gender, race, size, or shape that eating disorder is specified to. Most people don't realize how big of an issue that this topic is in today's society, but today I'd like to inform you of the different types of eating disorders and who this all applies to, and the importance that it is for our society to know about. Now, there are a lot of different types of eating disorders, and the National Eating Disorder Association gives us a list of them, but this isn't all of the eating disorders that exist. The list consists of anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, other specified eating disorder, or OSFED, orthorexia, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, pica, ruminant disorder, and unspecified feeding or eating disorder. Now, we're going to talk about 4 of those, the most popular, or the most known ones. That would be anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, and other specified feeding or eating disorders, or OSFED. Now, anorexia is well known, and so is bulimia. Anorexia can be potentially life-threatening. It's probably the one that most people think of when they hear the words eating disorder. People with anorexia have extreme weight loss a lot of the time. They struggle to maintain a good body weight. They have an intense fear of losing weight, and they really don't like the way that their body looks, even though most of the time they look fine. Now, bulimia nervosa is also potentially life-threatening. This eating disorder is a cycle of binging and purging. Now, binging is overeating, and purging is causing yourself to do something in order to reverse the effect of the overeating or the binging that you've already done. Usually this is self-induced vomiting or misuse of a laxative or medication or something else like that. People with bulimia feel like their binging and purging cycle becomes out of their control, to the point that it's not necessarily a want to do anymore, but a need to. These people self-evaluate and for what they look like, and they don't like themselves either. Now there's binge eating. This is the most popular in America. It is also severe and life-threatening. These people eat a large quantity in a small amount of time. They eat extremely quickly and feel like they lose control during an episode. By the time the episode is over, they feel shameful and guilt, and these episodes continue over and over. And the last one, other specified feeding and eating disorders, or OSFED. This one used to be called eating disorder not otherwise specified, but it's recently been changed. It used to be considered a catch-all for not so serious eating disorders that didn't have a specific label like anorexia or bulimia. But it has been recognized that these eating disorders are just as important and just as life-threatening. People with this disorder are just as likely to die from it as people with more clear disorders like anorexia or bulimia. Now that we've discussed the different types, I'd like to talk about stereotypes that fall behind eating disorders. When you hear about eating disorders, you probably think about a girl that's scarily underweight, maybe even sitting in a doctor's office, maybe something you've seen on a magazine or an ad. Well, that's not the case. A lot of the times people think that eating disorders hold a gender, usually identified with female, but that's not true either. Theodore Wilson and his associates tell us that men with anorexia and bulimia nervosa are counted for 10% of the people that have it. And binge eating disorder, they count for 25% of the people that have it. And if that's not enough for you to see the difference in the gender, or the fact that there's not a gender bias, there was another study that was taken for men that are in the U.S. Navy. And 48% of those men meet the criteria for OSFED, or the other specified feeding and eating disorder. 6.8% of those men suffer from bulimia nervosa. So it's not about a specific person. Now, I have some statistics I'd like to share with you. According to the National Eating Disorder Association, 40 to 60% of elementary age school ages 6 to 12 are considered to be concerned about their weight or concerned about becoming fat. And children whose mothers are overly concerned about their weight are at an increased risk of modeling their unhealthy attitudes and behaviors. Now, that means that they're at a higher risk to become victim to an eating disorder. So, there was another study that was also done by one organization we've already discussed, Real Stories, Real People. And in their study, they said that 81% of 10-year-olds are afraid of becoming fat. I don't think that a 10-year-old should be concerned about that. But if that doesn't open your eyes enough, maybe this one's a little more personal. Out of a random selection of 18 girls on NGU's campus, 6 or 1/3 of those girls said that they deal with eating disorders. And that's not including the guys. So think about that on the wider scale of how many people go to our campus. Now, in conclusion, I would like to remind you that most people don't think that eating disorders is a big deal, but that's just not true. There are no bias, no gender, no stereotypes, and it can happen to anyone. Thank you.